Whenever I read this introduction of Rav Kook, I'm always reminded of a mashal that the 𝗙𝗵𝗴𝗵𝗁 gave. The 𝗙𝗵𝗴𝗵𝗵 and Rav Kook were fond of each other. The 𝗙𝗵𝗴𝗵𝗵 once stood up and tore kriya because someone spoke poorly about Rav Kook in his presence. And the 𝗙𝗵𝗴𝗵𝗵 had deep respect for Rav Kook. And the 𝗙𝗵𝗴𝗵𝗵 once said the following mashal. In fact, he said this at the first Aguda convention, at the first Knessia of the Aguda. He got up to talk about how important it is to do what Rav Kook was doing, to go and to reach out to our brothers and sisters and to teach them and to, with open arms, not to shame them, but to, with open arms to come and to ask them to return and to say that we have so much that we've done wrong that is obviously making you want to go away from Judaism. And like Rav Kook himself said in one place, in one of his writings, Rav Kook said that in the last generation, it's not that people will go away from Torah, listen carefully to this line, it's not that people will go away from Torah because it'll be too hard. In the past, maybe that's the way that it was. In the past, people used to go away from Torah because the Torah was so lofty and demanded so much of us that we couldn't, but rather because Torah will become low in people's eyes. It's not that the Torah will be too high for people to live it, but the Torah will become low in people's eyes. They say we have better systems of morality because they'll see that people they're not living the ideal that the Torah is trying to give, and they'll be turned off from it. And so the 𝗙𝗵𝗴𝗵𝗵 said that we have to go out and we have to do something about this. We have to return the Torah to its pristine form and to give it back to the people so that they'll want it back. So Rav Kook got down from his pulpit, the 𝗙𝗵𝗴𝗵𝗵 got down from his pulpit, and he saw that people were talking amongst themselves. Who are we? After all, doesn't the Gemara say first a person should adorn themselves and then we have so many problems ourselves. How should we? These were very holy people. These were not small people. And the 𝗙𝗵𝗴𝗵𝗵 simply turned back around, got back on the pulpit, and said, once upon a time, there was a king who visited one of the towns that was under his control in his kingdom. And when he came to the town, they knew the king was coming, and the people in this town made a big feast for the king. And they prepared all the most amazing delicacies, and they served the most amazing drinks. Something happened that when they were serving they had wine and they had all the fine foods you could imagine, but somehow the water in that town had become almost toxic. And they figured water is water. What do you have to prepare water? So they took water, they put it in the pitchers. And the king, in the middle of the meal, at some point picked up one of the pitchers of water, poured himself a drink, or perhaps it was a king, someone else poured him the drink, and he started drinking the water and he spit it out. And he said, oh, this is disgusting. This water. He had someone test the water. They saw the water was toxic. And the king said, I'm making a decree here and now that anybody who's going to use water, I'm a benevolent king, I don't want people to get sick, I love my people. Anybody who's going to use this water in this town has to boil the water before they use it. A few weeks later, 𝗙𝗵𝗴𝗵𝗵 said a few weeks later, this king heard that this town burnt down to the ground. Towns in the olden days were built out of wood. There was a fire, burnt down to the ground. And when he sent one of his officers to find out what happened, he found out that the townspeople, when the fire broke out, started trying to put out the fire, but then they said, wait a minute, the king made a decree, you can't use the water unless you boil it first. So they started boiling up the water, and by the time the water was boiling, they put a little bit on the fire, but the fire was raging out of control. They boil up a little bit more water, and it was raging out of control until finally the entire town burnt down. The king said, you fools. He said, when I said that you're not allowed to use the water without boiling it first, I was talking about if you're going to drink it. But if there's a fire to put out, you put it out with whatever water you have. And the 𝗙𝗵𝗴𝗵𝗵 said, when the Gemara says that first you should adorn yourself and make sure that you're fitting to talk about certain things and to be machzor people to teshuva, that's talking about where we're talking about a regular time when we're talking about drinking the water as a luxury. When there's a fire burning in the world and people are being consumed by this raging fire, anybody who knows anything can throw anything they have at the fire. And so even though Rav Kook says, perhaps I don't feel that I'm worthy for this, and certainly I can say 1,000 times more, and I'm sure we all feel the same way, that we don't feel worthy of being part of a chabura of people who are learning together how to bring this medicine to the world. But there's a fire raging in the world, says Rav Kook. And therefore, lo tuchal kol chulsha ba'olam, the patreinu mitvias apnimis. There is no weakness, no fear in the world that could hold me back from this inner demand.